like I've always prided myself, especially over these past few years, as being an expert when it comes to franchise development lead generation. And I started to think that my knowledge of how to do that was my strength. And then I learned recently that it's not the knowledge of how to do it, because that's actually whatever I was doing before is actually obsolete.
Hey, welcome to What the Franchise, the regular podcast where we talk about franchise development strategies, tactics for growing a franchise system, and general best practices for how to build the franchise industry in positive ways. And today I have my franchise friend, Daniel Claps on from a cool looking studio in New York City. It's the way he rolls. Daniel, tell me a little bit about, first, thanks for joining the podcast. I'm super excited about this conversation, but introduce yourself and give us a little background on kind of how you got into franchising and what your career's been like.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do these from a studio now to avoid any tech issues, make it nice and quality sound. But Dan Claps. Again, thank you, Thomas, for having me on. My background in franchising is pretty simple. I stumbled into it like a lot of people have, unlike the students that I met at the Titus Center recently, which we'll get into. But I've always been an entrepreneur. I had a business in college, and I learned that I had more of a job than a business. The business was all me, very dependent on me, the customers and teammates. And so I started looking into franchises. And while I went through the discovery process in my early 20s to purchase a franchise, I actually fell in love with that whole process of awarding franchises. And so instead I became a business and franchise broker in 2014. And it was actually part of a franchise system for business brokerage. So there's a franchise for everything. Did that for a bit and then learned that I enjoyed franchise consulting much more. So I did that. And then in 2016, I ended up co-founding a lead generation company called Career Transition Leads with a partner. And it's a sister company to the IFPG, the International Franchise Professionals Group. We built that company up over from 2016, and it continues to build to this day. But in May of 2020, this year, I exited the business and began my journey into my next stage, which is being a franchisor.
Yeah, I'm excited. So you haven't announced. You're kind of superstitious, right? So we're not going to talk about your new brand, but it's coming soon, right? You're going to launch here pretty quickly. Is that the plan?
Yeah, I joke around. I'm Italian and superstitious. I believe in not talking about something until you really are launching it. But we just recently acquired, a small franchise brand in the home services space. We're improving all the systems and improving through best practices, and then we'll be taking that franchise system to the franchise marketplace in the coming months.
Nice. Exciting. Well, let's going to get to the topic today. It's a really fun topic. We're going to talk about the Titus Center's Selling Franchises Bootcamp. The Titus Center is a franchise educational program at Palm Beach Atlantic University in sunny West Palm Beach. The 80-degree weather with the beach nearby was really awful for January for us to spend the week. But it's that program's been around since 2017, and if you're not aware of it, you should be. It's has done an amazing job of creating a whole new crop of just amazingly trained, highly enthusiastic, new franchisors and franchise owners, and a steady stream of, you can actually go to that school and major in franchising. It's like one of the first of its kind. There's a few other systems now that are kind of copying what they're doing there, but it remains at the forefront, the best program in the country. Super excited. My own son, who's graduated from high school, is going there as a freshman to study franchising. Like literally, like he looked at 10 schools, my alma mater, his mom's alma mater, and like he says, like, I want to go here. These kids are like, it's like the enthusiasm they have for business and taking over the universe is super contagious. There's no slackers at that school. It's not Harvard, it's not an Ivy League school. It's just a bunch of driven, smart young people, thinking about franchising of all things, people that are 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So the Selling Franchises Bootcamp was, how would you characterize that? Because you didn't really know what to expect. That was your first event, right? At one of theirs.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, what I'll share with you is, so someone on our team that we brought on for franchise development, as we've been training him, he found this event and he suggested that we go. And I'd always heard of the Titus Center, but I never really knew much about it. Never really looked much into it. And so I went to the event, excited, but mostly to support my franchise development director and spend some time together and sharpen the saw myself. But I had no idea, first of all, from the event, the caliber of speakers. Like, you could have just gone to that, in my opinion, and listened to the two keynote speakers, and it's worth more money than you even had paid to go. Yeah. But what I really enjoyed was the opportunity to talk to the students, because it's just, these kids are just so motivated, and they love franchising already. So it's exciting to see that, we're growing the Titus Center is growing that industry, or our industry, to a younger generation.
For sure. And so let's talk about some, kind of go through some key takeaways, just got headlines for what were some things that you heard that kind of maybe made you think differently, or things you need to be prepared for. My first was that this idea is there was, Michael Mudd was one of the three keynoters along with Kayla Ryan and Dan Monahan, like some very different viewpoints on businesses. Michael's is the CEO of Brand One. I worked with Michael growing Menchie's back in the day. He's like one of my favorite recruiters in the industry. He's just a genuinely great human being, but he gave a very thoughtful presentation on working with FSOs and brokers and some general ideas around where people to get going. But I heard this idea over and over that, the FSOs, the outsourced franchise sales organizations, which are turbocharging growth at quite a few brands, and the big platform brands that have several brands, like they'll have like a Neighborly type brand or Belfour, like they're really consuming 80 or 90% of the broker capacity in the industry right now. Went from very small percentage to now it's, they have the budget and the structure and the systems to kind of dominate the broker networks. And for individual franchises that are looking to use brokers in a traditional way, that's a lot harder today than it was 5 years ago. It was never easy, but now it's even harder. You got to compete against people with, they know every broker. They're spending money to wine and dine them. They're talking to them every day. They're sponsoring they're everywhere those brokers look. They see, Horsepower Brands or Brand One or Rep'em or Franchise Fastlane or Ryan Zink's company, any of those groups. But what do you think about that? Is that a legitimate thing to say, or?
Well, my background is coming from that whole world. And I think that the few years ago, that wasn't the case. Now it's absolutely the truth. One of the panels, Michael Mudd's incredible. He's like a force of nature.
He's an awesome guy too. Yeah, awesome guy.
Yeah. And so listening to him and really understanding, like, if you're a franchisor and you're not part of a group like that, and you're trying to work with the broker channels, and then you hear someone like Michael Mudd is leading and that FSO, that's kind of who you're in theory competing with, and joining one of the FSOs. But Rob Cambruzzi, the panel with Trent Haverson, Rob Cambruzzi, Scott Marr, and Rick Bizio was one of my favorites. And Rob is a personal friend of mine. And when you see how much energy, time, money, and just attention they put into developing those deep broker relationships, I think if you have the desire to work with brokers and the means to a brand that can be picked up by an FSO, I think it's a great option for you. If you don't, I still think you can absolutely succeed in broker groups. I just think that you have to put the time, energy into it. And so you can't expect to just join a group and, leads are just going to come in because you've got the next best, thing since sliced bread. You have to put the time, money, and energy. And so in my opinion, absolutely can you succeed as long as you recognize that you have to put the energy in, just like we have to if we want to build a personal brand and go down the other paths.
Yeah, and it's, Michael's had everybody eating out of his hand because, again, he's such a good spokesperson. And they were like, well, how many brands do you work with now? Brand One is kind of one of the preeminent FSOs. It's like, we work with 15 brands. And they're like, well, how many are you going to take on this year? So we might take on 4 or 5. Like, that's like their max. Like, that's all they're going to take on. So if you think about the number of brands working with FSOs, it's a relatively small number out of the 7,000 plus franchise brands in North America that are kind of growing leaps and bounds. We're adding more than one new system a day now. It's ridiculous growth that we see going on. So let's switch to personal branding. You brought that up. I saw that you put up some videos with captions on them. Like, was that a takeaway you got from this, that personal branding might be something you have to start spending more time thinking about?
I am very much on that direction in my own career. That personal branding is one of the most important things you can do as a leader of an organization or salesperson or really any role. I would do it in any position you're in.
Yeah.
My biggest takeaway was that, lean into it more.
Yeah.
Lean into that even more and put a little bit more effort and energy into making the content. The content I'm doing is fine, but put a little more energy into the editing and the captions and all of those things.
Yeah. And personal branding, we're really talking about this Gary V style of, if you think about the millennials and Gen Z are going to make up the majority of franchise buyers in the next 2 years, like that we've had this shift where we're at a tipping point where baby boomers are less and less and less relevant, and Gen X, just by the nature of the small size of the population, it's people your age and younger are going to be the dominant kind of force in you're the future of franchising. You grew up as a millennial, and people in the generation below you grew up with this influencer culture. Like if you have people you zero in on because they were Instagram influencers, and now it's the short form video, the TikToks, the Reels, the YouTube Shorts, that kind of, even the native video on LinkedIn. And so I think what I see, my big takeaway of personal branding is that if you're serious, if you're a founder of a system, if you're a CEO, if you're a development person, like you're going to have to start producing that Gary V style content about the stuff that you almost have to be your own journalist and broadcast your story out to people and influence people and literally be an influencer. Like that's going to be the kind of source of how you get people's attention, because the short form video networks are now they have organic reach. People go to those to learn things. Like if I want to cook something, I go to TikTok to learn how to cook. The spaghetti sauce from the Bear Show on Hulu. Like that's my favorite thing to go cook. And I learned how to do that on TikTok made me do it. So I think you're going to see people buying franchise where they're saying, I bought this franchise because TikTok made me do it. They're like, that's the first ever. That's a cool concept. But I think people are going to have to invest money and time and resources. It isn't easy for the average person to do on their own. And you just have professional. There'll be a whole new kind of agency that comes out. And some agencies like my agency, Brand Journals, we do that for people. And it's a really valuable service. It's going to be fun to see who does that. And they made a point. Kayla Ryan, my daughter, spoke at one of the keynotes. She made a point of saying, look, if John Hayes, the director of the Titus Center, who's 72 and doesn't even know how to open his computer, is doing an amazing job of personal branding, probably the number one guy in franchising right now doing it. He's making it look easy. Like if he can do it, you guys have to get off your butt and start thinking about how you tell your story via personal branding and generate demand for your franchise and what you're doing. Because it makes total sense to me. Anything else you heard that was pretty cool?
Well, just to piggyback on the personal branding, like if someone's listening to this and they're thinking about wanting to do it, the first thing I would say is just pick up a phone and do it. Don't worry about making it perfect. Just put something out there and you'll get momentum. Like I noticed myself putting more and more energy and effort into it. And I'm shifting my budgets into putting more money into that versus other, or, traditional advertising and marketing. But, this is something I took away while I was at the event. A friend of mine said, I really want to do the personal branding, but a lot of my close friends, they're on LinkedIn and social, and I feel like they're going to make fun of me if I put the content out. I think that's a legitimate concern for maybe someone if they feel that way. And so like, I can understand it blocking you. And so what I had said was, hey, look, like if you feel that way and you're letting that stop you, first of all, don't.
Yeah.
But have a conversation with your friends. I did that. I had friends that, joked. And I said, look, I'm making more opportunity for myself through these videos and this content. So if you don't like it, then I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Then let's not be friends, or you could just keep it to yourself.
Well, but would you be so ashamed of your own personal kind of thought, and the stuff that you're passionate about, that you literally don't want to post stuff about it? Like, I think you have to be a real person and you have to care about the stuff you talk about. Like if, what we don't want to see is personal branding be the Avon lady selling makeup or some kind of like multi-level marketing stuff to their Facebook friends. Like that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people. Like I put, a TikTok up today and put it on LinkedIn as a LinkedIn video. Just a little short 30-second video talking about why I was reluctant to use Calendly and why I think if you're not using Calendly or a similar system today, you're going to lose franchise sales because before COVID, Dan Monahan made this point in his keynote. Before COVID, only 10 or 12% of people would kind of sign up using Calendly. It was like not the majority. Some people got comfortable with the technology, but most people weren't. Most salespeople were reluctant to use it because they like to have conversations with people and learn about them and see if they can dig a little bit. But post-COVID, 25% of people, if they have access to it, will book a calendar appointment with you without ever talking to you. It's like a shocking increase. And so if you're not using Calendly in all the obvious places, like we're thinking about using it in websites for recruitment where we replace the form with the Calendly. Like just screw the form, just book the appointment and show up, and the appointment has like the Google Meet link and all that stuff in it. But I made a little video like that, got a bunch of traction on it. And that, that was the little nugget of wisdom in 10 seconds or less kind of thing. But that's an important topic for somebody who's a franchise recruiter to do. And I think you have to think about those things. That kind of leads to a big takeaway from Kayla's, who's the CMO at Home Run Franchising, talked about conversational marketing, and that got people on the edge of their seat of talking about how people don't want to talk to you on the phone at all. Like the phone is like old school, that's like smoke signals, and like forget email. Email's not even relevant to younger buyers. Like they want to text. They want to have text conversations using messaging. Like that. She had this hashtag Slack culture. The people that remote workers that rely on Slack to communicate as their primary tool. They don't actually talk to each other. The idea of her having to have a 45-minute traditional phone call with a recruiter is painful for her. Like in her generation, like she doesn't like it. And so she's got pioneered a whole line of recruitment marketing and recruitment for franchise sales and for consumer marketing using Facebook Messenger to interact with customers and prospects. That's hugely effective. Dan Monahan got up and said, we're like at 500 to 1, 500 Facebook leads equals one sale. And it's this huge volume of contact information you have to wade through. And while he was talking about that, our companies, Kayla's and I, so we worked together, got 4 leads. One of them booked an appointment, one still in conversation. So we were a 50% conversion rate off of 4 leads in the middle of his presentation. It was blowing up his data. What do you think about that? I don't know if you've tried much in the conversational space, but that's something that that's a radical idea, but it makes logical sense.
Very experienced in the human being communicating with the franchise prospect through messaging. Yeah. I think that it's spot on. This conference for me, and a lot of times speaking with you, Thomas, is like motivation, or it's a reminder of things that I know that I'd like to just start doing. And that's kind of what you said. Gary Vee talked about, like, a lot of these ideas are not rocket science. Running a Facebook, and not to minimalize it, right? But running a Facebook ad with, instead of a lead form, you put a chat feature, and then putting someone on your team to answer that chat is not something that's going to take you 10 years to learn how to do. No. I'm a big believer, and I think you guys, what Kayla did was, well, first of all, very impressed by Kayla and what she's accomplished so far in her career. But I was also impressed by her confidence to get on stage and say, like, look, I know that everyone in this room is very experienced and accomplished in FranDev. Yeah. But here's some things you're doing wrong and where you're missing the boat, as you said. And so, yeah, I think that that's the future of FranDev for sure, with the Facebook ads with the Messenger. One of my big takeaways, and a couple more, was that people were giving a lot of thought into storytelling, deeper recruitment websites, and once you get somebody engaged, having a library of content that it relates to the specific stories. Like Michael Mudd talked a lot about, you have to get to the why, like in a Simon Sinek kind of style structure of, the why is different for every person, and you got to figure out who the people are that should buy your franchise, the people that have the skills and the financial wherewithal, the passion and the hunger, like those people. Like, what's the story that they can relate to, and how can you have that story told electronically before they talk to a recruiter in the form of short form videos for recruitment, which is something we're seeing very little of and beginning to see more of. But just, how can you give somebody an emotional experience, a day in the life video, a brand story, a pipeline of TikToks of what the franchisees are doing day in and day out, like that kind of information is more important. And the website, it's become playing an outsized role today. It's not just to send people to for conversion from AdWords. It's
it's this home base where somebody gets to kind of, they become aware of you on, say, a TikTok or a YouTube short or a Facebook ad or, even a Google search. And then it's the website is what tells the story and gets people engaged. That's where they go to click the Calendly link. They're not filling a form out. They're just booking a time. It's like, think of it as software demo. How many times have you been to a software website and, that you scroll down and they just want you to book a link on their Calendly? Why aren't we doing that in franchising? That makes total sense to me. That was a huge takeaway for me.
Yeah. One of the takeaways that I also had similar to that is, like, I've always prided myself, especially over these past few years, as being an expert when it comes to franchise development lead generation. And I started to think that my knowledge of how to do that was my strength. And then I learned recently that it's not the knowledge of how to do it, because that's actually whatever I was doing before is actually obsolete already. Obsolete.
Yeah. It's not an either or. It probably still works. Just there are some different channels that weren't around 5 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not that it's obsolete, but it's a thing that works, right? But it's actually, if you want to say, like, and really it's any space, it's the ability to learn the next thing and become an expert in that makes someone valuable, right? So for me, it's like understanding that I love and am passionate about franchise lead generation. And so have the ability and the desire to learn what I need to learn now in 2023. And I'll do that and same for you, right? You've been in this space for so long. It's not that because you know what to do from before, it's that you now know what to do today as well.
Well, you have to be, there's no constant in franchise marketing. You know this from the business you were in. Like, it's constantly, every conference you go to, they're like, there's a shift. It's changing. It is always changing. I think as a supplier, the brand journalist company that I started that's still doing really well is, they made a name for themselves by having the bleeding edge ideas of like, here's what's working now and here's the data to support that. But here are the 4 things, like the stuff we're talking about on this call, that you really need to think about as a founder and a development director and a marketing person. Like, these are things that are real. And if you go to the underused avenues for visibility, things like the personal branding and the short form videos and the conversational marketing are hot right now. Like, not everybody's doing those. So the first people to get to that, kill it. When we started doing Facebook ads in 2000, 16, 17, like whenever they first kind of rolled out the ad platform, it was like shooting fish in a barrel. It was like you get $2 leads and you'd get 1,000 leads, a ridiculous amount of lead flow. And you could get to them and they were real people. That's not true today. It's just, things kind of ebb and flux. Now everybody does Facebook. It's a normal part of the way that brings me to another really interesting takeaway of, there was a lot of conversation about the demise of Google AdWords and how paid search and even organic search to a slightly lesser extent, there's just less traffic and less attention and less volume. And, AdWords has gotten to be a horribly expensive avenue for high intent buyers. It still works, but it's very limited. Like we're used to be able to do AdWords and get on a $3,000 spend, 50 leads. You might get 10 today. It's 15. It's like much more expensive. There's just less people doing search-based searches. They're going to other places to do their research.
Absolutely. And just to clarify what I was saying is, like, with my previous company, which continues to thrive, that organization has to have someone in there, which I know they do, that is always, and that's always how it's been, is always learning and testing the next shift that will come. Right. And so, like, someone once told me that, like, if you're dependent on forget franchising, business in general, if there's a day where you feel like you've got your lead generation system and marketing it down, and you start to take a foot off the brake, know that you're going to face some detrimental issue in the future, whether it's a year, 5 or 10 years from now, you're going to hit an issue. And so whatever business you're in, especially in franchising, I think that you have to constantly either have someone on your team testing new ways to do lead generation, or you need to work with a supplier, a vendor, a supplier in franchising who has someone on their team that's constantly finding the new ways to do it. Because it's just like technology. It's always there aren't a lot of suppliers. I mean, FranDev marketing is really difficult. It's among the hardest types of marketing
it's a big ticket item with a lot of obstacles and a really long research funnel. Like it isn't like consumer marketing at all. So a lot of companies really struggle to find a kind of agency partner or development company that understands enough about franchising to execute well. And Brand Journalist is mostly a referral business. We don't do a lot of outside marketing. People will say they're raving fans of the work we've done over the last 2 decades, or they have no idea who we are. There's kind of nobody in between. We just hired Jack Monson to be the CEO of that. So I'm super excited about where that's going to go. And he's a storyteller extraordinaire. So that's going to be a lot of fun. The last takeaway I had, I thought was really interesting was more sales process oriented. If you've been in franchising even in your career, we've always been taught that you have to have this rigid sales process and you have to have steps and people have to move through the steps in a really uniform process. And if they won't follow the system, they're not good franchisees, which is total BS. There was a slide on the screen for one of the keynotes that it just had a maze, and really the sales process is different for every person now. You almost have to ask the question, like, how do you want to buy a franchise? Like, tell me about your buying process. What does it look like? And what do you want to know? And how do you want to learn? Do you want videos? Do you want to talk to a franchisee? And you get the buyer to kind of define the process and you get better engagement on that. And I've seen that's a real challenge for a lot of salespeople who've been doing it for a long time because they're so structured to their steps, and you got to be able to meet people where they are and flex. And sometimes you're having to do the entire sales press via text. It's a text conversation. The whole process is a text conversation. You're very little in the way of phone calls, and you got to be open to that if that's somebody wants. What do you think about that idea of the sales process changing?
Yeah, I forget the statistic that they used at the event, but the buyer journey is now so much. Well, just to piggyback really quick or to back up, I always think about franchise sales and I equate it to the car dealership model. Back in the day, when you went to a car dealership, they had the power because they had all the inventory. And the only way to really know about a car was to go to the car salesman. And there was no online. And the reason that car salesmen actually wouldn't let you leave in that like hard sale approach was that they knew that if you left, you were going to take the knowledge you had from there to the next dealership and bring it. And the next dealership you would probably end up buying because that car dealer would use the information that you gave them that the previous car dealer gave them and allow them to close. So that's the whole reason like car sales became such a high pressure situation. And now people go to the car dealership and they literally know exactly what they want. They look at their phone. They say, where do you have this? Actually, they don't even go there. They went there only when they know that you have it.
Yeah.
Right? So
my daughter bought a Fiat, like a little Fiat SUV of some kind off Carvana, like online. It was she just showed up to pick up her car. That was it.
And she talked to no one probably. She did all the research and then
it was completely an online process. Like she probably paid more for the car than she should have, but if she was happy, it was that's their expectation for the way things work on that.
Right. And so I think you look at Carvana, I think the sales process in Frandev it's the same thing. People are going to spend the majority of their time researching behind the scenes, and then they're going to talk to you for the end part. And someday I think that'll be nothing that they talk to you not at all. But I do think people still want to talk toward the end stages. But I think what I would recommend is that knowing that people are paying so much time and energy toward your content, your websites and podcasts and everything else, CRM solutions and technology that included can track that and can allow you to see who's interacting. And then perhaps you might text or call them more often. And so like we do have visibility to how our potential customers are interacting with our content.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Daniel, like it sounds like we both would say next year, if you're a Frandev professional, please go to this boot camp, this event that that center puts on. It's an educational, it's like all the good stuff of an IFA crammed into one session with no BS in the middle. It's just straight up value. It was very inexpensive to go to. It's much less expensive than any other event I've been to. And Palm Beach in January is pretty amazing. But man, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And good luck on your new franchise. I'm excited to see where it goes once the superstition wears off and you can make your formal announcement. But thanks
for having me.
All right.